Hey everybody, I don't have a lot of time today, but I did want to do an update on my waterfall. I talked about this a little bit in my live stream last night, but I know only a handful of people got to see that, so I wanted to do an official update video on my waterfall now that I've got the leak sorted out. So let's go over a few things before we get to the leak, and that is some of the plants that I've added. You'll see up on the top left I've planted some of that dead nettle that I had out in the yard. I've got that just in a regular old planter, and we're going to water that as needed and let it grow. Hopefully it'll hang down and sort of cover that left side and sort of break up that line visually a little bit. And likewise up on the top right you can see I moved that arrowhead plant over there, and I'm hoping that will grow down and sort of break up the line on the right here. I've got that piece of wood there that's kind of designed to do that, but honestly until I move around and you start to notice that piece of wood's even there, you know, when you're standing right here, it just sort of disappears. So I'm hoping we can get that arrowhead plant growing down and sort of draping over that piece of woodwork. As you can see, it goes all the way down into the tank, and then it is actually a pretty significant piece of wood once it's down in the tank. That's just a branch I found out in the yard one day after we had a storm one night, and so I like it. Anyway, moving on, we've got some creeping Jenny right here, which is actually starting to do really well. I'm deliberately keeping my big powerful light turned off, and for a moment here I'm going to turn it on just so we can see what we're looking at a little more clearly. Also a little more colorfully. This gives it a much more high quality light. You can see how much more vibrant everything looks now that I've got that light turned on. So we've got creeping Jenny in this planter right here. That's already showing signs of new growth. If you look in the back there, you can see some stuff that's sticking straight up. That's a good sign. I've also put some dead nettles in here. Now, dead nettles are a fairly low light plant, and that's why I'm kind of keeping my powerful overhead grow light turned off. I'm hoping that I don't over light the tank. And likewise with the plant that I found out at the reservoir, it's all this stuff. I put it in a little, this is actually the lid from a fish food container, and that is just river gravel, and there's no soil or anything in there. So the idea is I'm going to let it get fairly dry. Hopefully the occasional little splish or splash will get in there and keep it damp. I don't want it even moist, I just want it damp. And if it dries out too much, I can always just put a few little dribbles of water in there with my fingertips and keep that moist. But it's a fairly low moisture plant, and that also does not like a lot of light. And so again, we're going to try to keep this overhead light turned off, or at least on for a minimum amount of time, in order to maximize the potential of that growing. I've also got a few little bits and pieces of Java moss. That dark green stuff you can see right there is Java moss, and I've got some Java moss tucked in up and around in here, and you can see how we've got this steady dripping, and there's water that flows over here, and we usually have a steady dripping coming off this corner. So there is a little supply of moisture over on this side that should keep that stuff doing pretty well. So I've also got Java fern tucked in here and here. I've got a little bit of Java moss thrown in around the rocks, and hopefully that'll start growing and doing well. I tucked in a piece of temple plant. You can see it coming up right here, and it goes all the way through here, and the roots are down here, and there's a couple little sprouts that I'm hoping will start growing up, and we'll get some serious temple plant growing in there. Got some anubias tucked in under the rock. Of course, we got more Java fern right here. Up in the top section, we've got water sprite. I've got some water sprite up in here as well. And then I've thrown in some Java moss up in this area. I don't think is really going to do anything, but we'll have to wait and see. So getting on to the important part was the leak. I had said that I believed originally that the leak was not coming through the waterfall, but it was actually leaking down and dripping off of this corner, and that's exactly what I found out was happening. The water was running down the outside, and it was dripping down the outside of the glass, and so now you can see this area that was so damp is completely dried off. I mean, this is even bone dry now. So that was it. That little bit of leaking that was dripping around that outside was the only thing that was causing me any problems, and all I did was cut the rubber out of the way. You can see where I just sort of notched some of that foam, and then I took a piece of plastic. It's actually an old GoPro piece of packaging that my GoPro camera came in, and I just tucked it right under the edge like that, and it sits in there, barely even noticeable. And now as the water drips on it, it just flows back over and drips back into the aquarium. So that's it. That's my solution. All done. I'm not going to worry too much more about it. And the reason is I can't really. I mean, we've got, I would literally have to build this up in a way that it didn't drip and water didn't run down over it, because that's what's happening. This is actually a really deep channel, and water gets on this and it just gets wet and it runs down this channel and it's dripping out the bottom. And because of the way I've got it shaped, it's unfortunately, it runs down and then it drips outside the tank. It's not running all the way around and going in. And so having that little tray there is going to be my little fix. Again, that's, you know, I know that's probably not a fix to some people's description, but for me, that's a fix. That's done. I'm not going to worry too much more about it. As long as that stays there, I won't have any more issues. And if it gets knocked out of the way, I'll notice by simply seeing a little tiny bit of moisture developing. Again, it was not a serious concern to begin with. It was a very, very minor leak, but we've now got it fixed and there's no leak at all, and everything is working just fine. So there you go. That's the update on my waterfall tank. Make sure you're subscribed. You don't want to miss anything I've got coming up. And of course, you want to ring that bell, because you never know when I'm going to do a spur of the moment live stream, and you don't want to miss any of them. So thanks for watching this one. I'll see you real soon in the next one.